Greetings, Missouri Mid-South Conference. Thank you so much for your interest in the conference, in watching this video that we discuss the revisions to the Missouri Mid-South Conference Constitution and Bylaws. Please know that there has been a lot of work, a lot of time, but most of all, a lot of prayer that has gone into each of these revisions. I give thanks for those who have served on this subcommittee: Nancy Litzinger, Joyce Bathke, James Ross, Rob Van Ness, Bill Wiedenstein, Andrea Osselmeyer. For each of them, they have held in their foundation you, the churches, the ministers, the members, the communities of the Missouri Mid-South Conference, to make sure that we are who we say we are as the Missouri Mid-South Conference, to make sure that in this moment that we are both flexible, but we also are strong in who and whose we are. So I hope that you will watch with the same commitment and energy, curiosity, and love for the body of Christ in the expression of the Missouri Mid-South Conference. Welcome.
Thanks very much for making time to talk with us about the proposed changes to our bylaws. Our committee thought an introduction, so that we're all kind of on the same page and have the same background, would be helpful to get our discussion started. And while these may seem new to you, the beginnings actually go back 3 years to February 2019. That's when a strategic visioning task force was formed. And then growing from that group's work, in August of 2019, there was a conference-wide gathering in Columbia, Missouri. And from that, a unifying call was developed, and eventually then the 4 core ministries emerged from that work. By February 2020, Conference Council was looking at our existing structure to see if it actually would enable the call and core ministries and also address the realities of our conference resources. We saw that we needed to create a model that works with fewer people and less money, one that reimagines our covenant with one another and encourages servant leadership. A task group presented bylaw revisions that address these needs to council, but by then we were in pandemic mode, so a vote on the unifying call and core ministries and bylaws was delayed. Then at the April CAG, which was conducted virtually, we shortened the meeting to deal just with urgent business and the call of our new ACM. In May last year, a new council subcommittee resumed the work of bylaw review. And in August 2020, council approved the unifying call and core ministries. Then in October, again last year, council reviewed and approved the revisions that you're looking at, with the recommendation that they be submitted to conference annual gathering for a vote. So that's how we got where we are to this point, to talk about the changes and why they are being recommended today.
To start, let's look at a diagram of the current structure. What stands out is a lot of named task groups, but how many of these are actually working? And how are they connected with the governing body for both communication and support? And how realistic is it that these groups are expected to continue to focus and thrive forever? Now here's a look at the proposed structure. Its foundation is our 4 core ministries: empowering congregations, creating community, pursuing justice and equity, visioning the future. And rather than naming never-ending task-oriented groups related to those ministries, there would be small work groups developed from interested individuals with specific goals. And once these goals are met, the group would dissolve. But during its tenure, the group is connected with the governing body through the core ministry team. Here's an example of how that might work. Say a group of conference members is interested in environmental justice, and their goal is to host a webinar about how Missouri Mid-South churches can go green. Those people would get together with the support of the Pursuing Justice and Equity core ministry team. They'd conduct a webinar, share their resources they identified with all Missouri Mid-South congregations, and then they'd be done and free to move in another direction or not.
We may be getting ahead of ourselves, and by talking about the governing body and how it functions, how it actually works. So what I want to do is to go back and touch on some things that may have popped out to you and clarify those and elucidate those. And those are three things. Number one is the name of the governing body. Number two, the size of the governing body. And number three, the composition of the governing body. Three important aspects about the proposed bylaws. First of all, the name of the governing body. In looking at and talking with various churches in Missouri, various nonprofits in Missouri, and across the country, we found that most nonprofits use the term board of directors. Council may be a good word, but we felt like board of directors was a better word describing what actually the conference is supposed to be doing, the conference leadership. So that's number one. The name of the board of the group, the governing body, would now be called the board of directors. Secondly, the size of the board of directors. And looking at that same data, that same information about nonprofits across the country and locally in Missouri and so on, we decided that in contrast to the present number, which is 24, that most nonprofits have a number that approximates somewhere between 15 and 18. A little bit less number, but maybe more appropriate. And since we have three associations, Western, Eastern, and St. Louis, we decided that 3 into 18, we didn't decide that, that's a fact, 3 into 18 goes 6. So we would then have 6 persons from each of the 3 associations, and that would work out pretty well. And alongside of that, let's talk about the composition of the board of directors. And because of that, I need to refer to my notes, and I'm probably going to be reading some things here. We retained equal distribution between the associations, equal distribution lay and clergy, but also we wanted to describe the makeup of this important leadership group. We want to reflect our conference's sincere commitment to diversity and equity. The advanced materials that were included with the proposed bylaws include a page that gives brief definitions for some terms that you may or may not be familiar with. It's an opportunity to learn a little bit, as indeed I have learned. Our working group, work with our national office to identify historically underrepresented groups to ensure inclusivity on this important body. And we wanted to hold ourselves accountable to diversity and equity and inclusivity but in the bylaws. We felt that was a critically important piece. So in order to hold ourselves accountable, we decided to include in the bylaws a provision for at every conference annual gathering, there would be a reckoning of how faithful we have been to that commitment. Regarding the board, you may also notice that we've added an assistant treasurer. Turns out the responsibilities of the treasurer are broad enough to require more than one person. And additionally, the fiduciary responsibilities of all boards of directors are pretty important. It's a critical piece. So we wanted to be sure to adequately take care of that responsibility. Finally, we have given more depth and breadth to what we call the Personnel Committee. That function has been accomplished by cobbling together the leadership and development role with that of some aspects of the executive committee. We feel the duties and oversights assigned to this function deserve a separate committee, which is linked to the board of directors. And that link is maintained. The liaison for that is added to by the fact that the vice moderator will be a member of both the executive committee and the personnel committee.
Okay, we're ready to look at how this new structure actually works, beginning with line 214 in our proposed bylaws. As we identified earlier, there are 4 core ministries with a provision to create more as needed. The board members who are not officers are assigned to those ministries, and one of them will serve as chair for each. Each ministry team will be made up of a representative from each association, appointed by its council, and 3 or 4 board members. This body then supports and oversees the work of any small working groups related to its mission. Small working groups are members of congregations throughout the conference who have a passion for a specific aspect of ministry: youth or adult ministry, local church ministry, strategic planning and future visioning, and so on. There are no required or established small working groups. Rather, these are just church members who want to be involved in a particular aspect of living out our unifying call. Small working groups may be created by a core ministry or engaged from conference members and be approved by the board. That's a broad brush description that we know will be important to flush out in our discussions. Finally, you may have noticed that we added a provision in Robert's rules for virtual meetings. That omission in our current bylaws has created some real challenges for us all this past year.
We hope this introduction has laid the foundation for our gathering and covered some of the basic questions you may have had when you reviewed the document. Thank you again to all who worked tirelessly on our bylaws committee over the last 2 years, and for those who met with our strategic planning 2 years ago, and the work that we have done together as a conference. We look forward to the discussion with you and the continued work that we will do together.